The winter of 1844 brought more than just cold to Mühlberg in the Grand Duchy of Baden, now part of Karlsruhe, Germany. It brought Karl Friedrich Benz into the world, a child born to modest circumstances but extraordinary maternal devotion. His father, Johann Georg Benz, worked as a locomotive driver for the Baden Railway Company, providing a stable if modest living for his family. The steady rhythm of the engines Johann guided would later echo in his son's mechanical inclinations, though fate would intervene before he could witness this legacy unfold. When pneumonia claimed Johann's life in July 1846, everything changed. Karl was not yet 2 years old, and his mother Josephine, only 25, found herself a widow with no means of support. The Germany of the 1840s offered no safety nets for women in her position, no social security, no widow's pensions. Josephine faced a stark choice: remarry quickly or find a way to support herself and her son independently. With remarkable determination, she chose self-reliance. Josephine took in laundry and performed domestic work for wealthy families in Karlsruhe. The income was meager and the work physically punishing. Many evenings, after Karl had been put to bed, neighbors would see candlelight flickering in the widow Benz's window as she continued sewing or mending clothes for additional income. Despite their poverty, Josephine harbored unconventional ambitions for her son. While most working-class children of that era began contributing to family income as soon as they were physically able, she insisted that Karl's education take priority. Education, she would tell him, is the one thing that cannot be taken from you once acquired. Their dinner table often featured only simple fare, potato soup, bread, and occasionally sausage when finances permitted. But the conversation nourished Karl's developing mind. Josephine shared stories about his father's work with locomotives, planting the seeds of mechanical curiosity that would define his life's trajectory. Your father could tell by the sound alone when something wasn't right with an engine, she would explain. He understood machines like they were living things. By age 9, Karl had become painfully aware of their poverty compared to his classmates. One winter morning in 1853, as Josephine served him a breakfast consisting only of bread and weak tea, she noticed tears in his eyes. "What troubles you, Karl?" she asked, placing her worn hand on his shoulder. "Friedrich and Heinrich laughed at my patched trousers yesterday," he replied. "They said we are poor because I have no father." Josephine knelt beside him, her eyes level with his. "Listen to me, Karl. We may not have what they have today, but we have something more valuable. You have a mind that can create what others cannot even imagine. One day, those boys will look at what you have built with that brilliant mind of yours, and they will remember their foolish laughter." This conversation became a turning point. Rather than allowing him to internalize shame about their circumstances, Josephine transformed their poverty into a narrative about future triumph through intellect and determination, a perspective Karl would carry throughout his life. Despite their financial constraints, Karl's academic performance was exceptional. His teachers quickly recognized his unusual aptitude for mathematics and natural sciences. His particular fascination was with movement and mechanics. When Karl was 11, Josephine saved for months to purchase a used book on basic mechanics, which became his most treasured possession. Many nights, she would find him asleep at their small table, the book open beside him, pencil drawings of wheels, levers, and pulleys scattered across the surface. A modest improvement in their circumstances came when Karl turned 12 and Josephine secured a position as a cook for the wealthy Schumann family. The work was demanding but provided more stable income. More importantly, it included lodging in the servants' quarters, eliminating their rent expense. Karl sometimes assisted in the household after school, running errands for small payments that he proudly contributed to their meager finances. Heinrich Schumann noticed the serious boy's interest in mechanical objects and offered Karl access to his personal library, which included volumes on engineering and natural philosophy. This unexpected resource transformed Karl's education, allowing him to discover advanced concepts in steam power, metallurgy, and early electromagnetic principles. He absorbed these materials with an intensity that impressed even Schumann, who had initially offered access as a casual kindness rather than expecting genuine scholarly engagement from a servant's son. By age 14, Karl's academic performance had caught the attention of his school's headmaster, who recommended that he continue to secondary education at the Lyceum. This recommendation presented Josephine with a difficult decision. Secondary education wasn't free, and it would delay Karl's entry into gainful employment that could help support them. Many families in their position would have chosen the immediate financial benefit of an apprenticeship. One evening in the spring of 1859, they discussed this choice at their small table. Josephine had just returned from work, her hands red from washing and her shoulders stooped with fatigue. "Herr Müller says you should continue at the Lyceum," she began. "He believes you have the mind for higher education." "But the fees," Karl replied, aware of their precarious finances. "Yes, the fees," she acknowledged. "They are substantial." "I could begin an apprenticeship instead," Karl suggested. "Herr Weber would take me in his carpentry shop." Josephine studied her son's face before speaking with quiet certainty. "You will go to the Lyceum. But how will we manage?" Karl pressed. "I have been offered additional work at the Schumanns. Their cook is leaving, and I will take on her duties as well." She didn't mention this meant rising at 4 in the morning and working until late evening, effectively doubling her already exhausting workload. "It's too much," Karl protested, recognizing the sacrifice. Josephine took his hands in hers, an unusual gesture for the typically reserved woman. "Listen carefully, Karl. There are two kinds of poverty in this world. There is the poverty of the purse, which is our situation today. But there is also the poverty of dreams, which is far worse. I will not allow either of us to suffer that second kind of poverty." Karl began at the Lyceum that autumn. Josephine took on the additional responsibilities, the physical toll evident in her increasingly stooped posture and the streaks of gray appearing in her dark hair. Yet she never complained, even when returning home so exhausted that Karl had to help remove her shoes because her swollen fingers couldn't manage the laces. The Lyceum's social environment brought new challenges. Most of Karl's classmates came from wealthy families who maintained class distinctions through subtle but unmistakable social codes. Rather than becoming bitter about these exclusions, Karl channeled his energy into academic excellence. By his second year, even the wealthiest students sought his help with complex mathematics and physics problems. The winter of 1860 brought crisis when Josephine collapsed from exhaustion, bronchitis, and malnutrition. The physician was blunt, working 16 hours daily with inadequate food. The human body isn't a machine that can continue indefinitely under such conditions. That night, as Josephine lay feverish, Karl voiced his concern. "I should leave school and work full-time. Your health is more important than my education." Though weakened, Josephine's response was forceful. "No, that is exactly what we must not do. This illness is temporary. If you leave school, that decision would be permanent. But you're suffering because of me," Karl insisted. "I'm not suffering because of you, Karl. I'm investing in you. That's a difference." She gathered her strength to continue. "Every mother hopes her child will have a better life. But you have a gift that goes beyond that. Your mind understands how things work, how to make them better. The world needs that gift." She closed her eyes briefly before adding with surprising intensity, "Promise me something, Karl. Promise me that no matter how difficult things become, you will not abandon your education. Promise me you will use that brilliant mind of yours to build something meaningful." Karl promised, but also resolved to reduce her burden. He began tutoring younger students and secured weekend work, assisting a local watchmaker, using the income to improve their circumstances and hire occasional help for the heaviest household tasks. By 1861, when Karl was 17, his mathematics teacher recommended him for admission to the Polytechnic School in Karlsruhe, an institution focused on technical and engineering education. This opportunity represented the chance to receive formal training in mechanical principles, but the tuition was substantially higher than the lyceum's. The evening he received the acceptance letter, he sat at their table, excitement warring with practical resignation. "I've been accepted," he told Josephine, "but the fees are beyond our means. I'll write to decline and inquire about apprenticeships instead." Josephine watched him silently before standing and retrieving a small cloth bag from their document cabinet. It clinked softly as she placed it on the table. "Open it," she instructed. Inside, Karl found gold and silver coins, almost exactly the amount needed for the first year's tuition. "How?" he asked, stunned. "One coin at a time," Josephine answered simply. "A little set aside from every payment since you were born. Sometimes only a few pfennigs, sometimes nothing at all for months when things were hardest, but always with this day in mind." The revelation of this long-term financial strategy, maintained through years of near poverty, left Karl speechless. While he had witnessed his mother's daily sacrifices, this evidence of her sustained vision for his future, spanning almost 2 decades, represented a dimension of parental devotion he had not fully comprehended. Karl enrolled at the Polytechnic in the autumn of 1861. The curriculum perfectly aligned with his interests: mechanical engineering, material science, physics, and advanced mathematics. For the first time, he found himself in an educational environment where practical application was valued as highly as theoretical knowledge. He formed friendships based on intellectual compatibility rather than economic status and developed a close relationship with Professor Ferdinand Rettenbacher, a pioneer in mechanical engineering who recognized Karl's exceptional talent. In 1864, Karl graduated from the Polytechnic. At the modest celebration dinner in their home, Josephine raised her glass of watered wine. "To your father. He would have been so proud to see the man you've become." Karl raised his own glass. "To you. Without your sacrifices, I would never have had this opportunity." Josephine shook her head slightly. "Not sacrifices, investments," she corrected. "And now we begin to see the returns." Karl secured a position at an engineering firm designing industrial equipment. The work was steady and reasonably well compensated, allowing them to move to a slightly larger apartment with better heating, a significant improvement for Josephine's health. However, the routine work failed to satisfy Karl's growing ambition to create truly innovative mechanical systems. His particular fascination was with self-propelled vehicles, machines that could move without animal assistance. In 1867, Karl learned of the Paris World Exhibition, where the latest technological innovations would be showcased. Recognizing this as a vital opportunity to observe cutting-edge developments, he was dismayed by the substantial cost of attendance. Without consulting him, Josephine sold her only valuable possession, a gold locket containing portraits of her parents, to fund his trip. When she presented Karl with the travel money and explained its source, he initially refused. "That locket is your heritage. I can't take the only connection you have to your parents." "Karl," she replied patiently, "you are my heritage now. What matters is not what we keep but what we create. Go to Paris, see these new machines, then come back and build something better." The Paris exhibition proved transformative. Karl encountered the latest developments in internal combustion engine technology, particularly Etienne Lenoir's atmospheric gas engine. While impressed by the concept, he immediately identified inefficiencies and began conceptualizing improvements before returning to Germany. By 1870, Karl had established his own mechanical workshop, focusing on engine development. The initial capital came from their combined savings, supplemented by loans from former classmates who believed in his technical abilities. The workshop focused primarily on gas engine development, building on innovations Karl had been refining since the Paris exhibition. The timing proved fortunate despite wartime disruptions following the Franco-Prussian War. The rapid industrialization following German unification created strong demand for stationary engines to power factory equipment. Karl's designs, more efficient and reliable than many competitors, found a receptive market, allowing the workshop to achieve profitability within its first year. In 1872, Karl married Bertha Benz, a woman from a middle-class family who believed in his vision and invested her dowry in his business ventures. Bertha brought not only financial resources, but also administrative and marketing capabilities that complemented Karl's technical genius. Josephine, then 51, moved into a small but comfortable apartment near the Benz home, purchased for her by Karl. For the first time in her adult life, she was freed from the necessity of physical labor for survival. While Karl's stationary engines provided financial stability, his true ambition remained focused on self-propelled vehicles. By 1878, he had begun serious development of an internal combustion engine specifically designed for vehicular propulsion. This work required significant technical innovations to create engines with suitable power-to-weight ratios for transportation use. The development process stretched over several years, with numerous technical challenges and setbacks. When an experimental engine cracked during testing in 1883, destroying months of work, Karl simply noted in his journal, "Failure instructs more thoroughly than success. Tomorrow we begin rebuilding with an improved cooling system." Throughout this period, Karl maintained regular contact with Josephine, often discussing technical challenges during their weekly visits. Though now in her 60s and with limited formal education, she continued to offer practical insights that occasionally helped Karl reconcile problems from new angles. In 1885, Karl's persistence culminated in the creation of the Benz patent motorwagen, a three-wheeled vehicle powered by a single-cylinder four-stroke engine. This vehicle, though primitive by modern standards, represented the world's first practical automobile designed from the ground up as a unified system, rather than simply attaching an engine to a traditional carriage. The patent motorwagen's first test drive took place in Mannheim in July 1886. When Karl visited Josephine the following day to describe the achievement, she listened to his detailed technical explanation, nodding occasionally, though likely understanding only portions of the mechanical specifics. When he finished, she asked simply, "Did it work as you imagined it would?" "Better in some ways, worse in others," Karl replied honestly. "The engine performance exceeded my calculations, but the steering requires significant improvement." Josephine smiled. "So you've built a machine that moves itself, just as you said you would all those years ago." "We did," Karl corrected gently. "Without your sacrifices, none of this would have been possible." Josephine waved away this acknowledgement. "I simply provided opportunities. You built the machine." After a thoughtful pause, she added, "And what will you build next?" This question, looking forward rather than celebrating the current achievement, perfectly encapsulated the mindset she had cultivated in her son throughout their years of struggle. Josephine passed away in early 1887 after a brief illness, having seen her son's invention but not its commercial acceptance. At her modest funeral, Karl reflected on the extraordinary journey they had shared, from the desperate poverty of his early childhood to the creation of a technology that would eventually transform global transportation. The watershed moment for the automobile came in August 1888, when Bertha Benz, without Karl's prior knowledge, drove the improved patent motorwagen on a 65-mile journey from Mannheim to Pforzheim with their two teenage sons. This bold demonstration proved the vehicle's practical utility for long-distance travel and generated publicity that transformed public perception of the automobile from novelty to viable transportation. Following Bertha's historic journey, interest in the patent motor wagon increased substantially. By 1890, Karl had established Benz and C. Rheinische Gasmotorenfabrik, which became the world's first automobile manufacturing company in the modern sense. The company's growth over subsequent years vindicated both Karl's technical vision and Josephine's early sacrifices. By 1899, Benz and C had become the largest automobile manufacturer in the world, employing over 430 workers and producing vehicles that incorporated continuous technical improvements. Throughout this period of commercial success, Karl maintained certain habits formed during his years of poverty. He continued wearing clothes until they were thoroughly worn, avoided ostentation despite growing wealth, and maintained a workshop in his home where he could develop new ideas without corporate pressures. In 1926, economic pressures led to the merger of Benz and C with Daimler Motorengesellschaft, creating Daimler-Benz AG, the corporation that would produce Mercedes-Benz vehicles. This corporate evolution represented the ultimate commercial success of Karl's vision. Karl Benz lived to see his invention transform from curiosity to global necessity. By the time of his death in 1929 at age 84, automobiles had fundamentally changed patterns of human settlement, commerce, and social interaction throughout developed nations. In his final years, Karl occasionally spoke to young engineers about his development path. While he freely shared technical details of his innovations, he emphasized that his most important advantage had not been mechanical aptitude, but the unwavering support of a mother who believed in possibilities others couldn't see. She created the engineer before the engineer created the automobile, he would tell them, summarizing decades of shared struggle and triumph. The legacy of Karl and Josephine Benz extends far beyond the Mercedes-Benz trademark that still adorns premium automobiles. Their story illuminates how determination can transcend circumstance, how education can transform opportunity, and how a mother's sacrifice and vision can ultimately change the world through the achievements of her son. Behind every great invention lies not just technical innovation, but human relationships that nurture potential through adversity, a truth exemplified in the remarkable journey from the poverty of 1840s Baden to the creation of the modern automobile.